Macron seeks forgiveness for French's law in Rwanda genocide but stops for short apology. French President Emmanuel Macron publicly has acknowledged French overwhelming responsibility in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. French did not understand that while trying to prevent regional conflict or civil wars, it was in fact understanding by the side of genocide regime. Macron said on Thursday following a visit to the Gisozi Memorial in Rwanda capital city, which is Kigali. By doing so, it was endorsed the overwhelming responsibility. Macron added in the strongly public admission of responsibility from French leader to that. This historical statement was pronounced during Macron's trip to Rwanda, country central to President's strategy to reshape French's image in Africa. Rwandan genocide survivors group, speaking to media, had mixed reaction to French President Emmanuel Macron's statement. President of Survivor Association Ibuka in French Etienne Sanzimana said that although survivors wanted a clear apology, French President Emmanuel Macron had asked forgiveness, in other words, in a highly symbolic moment for survivors. The Feroza, as a researcher of Rwandan genocide and member of a collective of civil plaintiffs for Rwanda, told media she was very disappointed that Macron did not clearly speak boldly about apologies. Rwanda said French bore responsibility for enabling 1994 genocide. He said that only victims could pardon French, but how could they pardon if no one asked? Researcher Dafalos said ever since genocide and French have been accused by survivor group and researcher of militarily supporting the French-speaking Hutu regime in that time, which it is to solve essential illness in Africa. Even after massacre had started in 1994, over 800 southern mainly ethnic Tutsis were killed by Hutu militarily in 100 days. Macron also vowed that no suspected genocide patriot will be able to avoid justice, because recognizing our past is also above all else continuing the work for justice. Above all, really, Macron said he wants to see the continuing ahead of justice working daily right. French have been blamed for following irregular Hutu patriots to leave Rwanda and to let some of them live in France under dispute for years. Bringing them to justice is one of the main fights led by Survivor Association Ibuka. A major step forward. Macron's admission was based on the conclusion of Ducrat report, independent report commissioned by the French presidency, which established the French's overwhelming responsibility in the genocide that took place in Rwanda. Rwandan President Paul Kagame praised the Macron words on a Thursday, saying that there was something more valuable than apology. They are very true. This speech was a major step in a relationship between these two countries. Kagame added that Rwandan genocide suspect compounded in policy subdued after a decade on the running. French and Rwanda are going to relate much better to the benefit of both people. Kagame said even the relationship between the two countries will never be entirely convictionally. The visit in Kigali, Gisozi Memorial, was intended to mark a final step in the normalization between the French and Rwanda. But for some activity, the most important steps are yet to come. Janine Munyeshuli, Rwandan researcher who works with the Survivor Association, told media that the most important is not what he said at the memorial, but which an action judicially and legislative will be taken. I want it to come impossible for officials to minimize the French involvement in the genocide, whipping colonial slaughter career. French President Emmanuel Macron and Rwandan President Paul Kagame speak at their walk in the ground of the presidential palace in Kigali, May 2007, 2021. For Macron, reconciliation memory in Rwanda goes beyond just one country. From Rwanda to Algeria, the French president is making a concentrate effort to reset ties for Africa's population. This issue of involvement of French in Rwanda is not just about our own national history or the bilateral relationship with Rwanda, a research source said. It is also about French relationship with the whole continent, the research source added about it. Shortly after this election, Macron announced that he wanted to depart from traditional French policy in Africa and move on from the colonial heritage. In speech in Burkina Faso, Dougudi University in 2017, Macron said about that. He came from a generation for whom colonial crises are undeniable and are a part of our history. Macron acknowledged in Mogadishu University. Faced with glowing anti-French sentiment on the continent, Macron had been trying to whip a clear slaughter over French's colonialism and a past colonialism image, said Antonio Gleb, journalist and expert in the relationship between the French and African countries, mentioned about that. But despite his effort, there was never been as much as anti-French sentiment on the continent among population as much as among business and diaspora. It happened at all, Glady also added in his article. The Rwanda trip has not been without controversial either. Some have criticized Macron for overlooking Kagame's alleged human rights abuse, including the silencing of opposition leaders, some of whom have disappeared and been imprisoned for no reason. Peace, and these people are really pointing about that Macron don't consider about those majority is supposed to be considered. High-profile opposition leader Victoria Ingabire and Bernard Ntaganda criticized Macron silently on Kagame's political repression in a statement ahead of his visit on Tuesday. It is time for President Macron to realize that political and economic interests that he will bring to the region are not worthy, trampling on the value of democracy and their return to. Beyond acknowledging French complicity in the genocide, some like French Grand and the French researcher on the Rwandan genocide believe that country need to acknowledge the political choices that lead it to support genocide in Rwanda. French turned a blind eye to massacre and continue to support the Hutus simply to maintain its influence in the region, Grama also said. And an issue is that if we do not draw those critical political lessons, there is no reason for historical not to repeat itself because the French policy has not yet changed, he added about that. Frenchers apparently blinded to trauma that led their country into blindness and darkness back in the continent of Africa. For Cameroonian post-colonial academic Alicia Mbassa say there can be no due political criticizing relationship between the French and Africa because while the full anti-French statement, French political choice is being ready in Africa at all. Many of complain about the French involvement in the modern days African statement for this controversial and continued control over the CFA French currently used in 80 West African countries and 60 countries in Central Africa mean the pre-colonial and modern colonial of French in Africa still lay be in Africans' life, the researcher said. Also unpopular are the frankly intervention by the French militarily and particularly in the Sahara Desert, where French is fighting terrorist insurance along an army from Burkina Faso, Mali, Mauritania, Nigeria, and Chad. Last June, army was accused of launching air track that managed to storm and kill very many people. But what happened is that in the beginning they did a good choice to support Mali, the army group to which was labeled to do coup, which led to some new government regime to take place. French was about behind of that. French army defended itself in a press release blaming disinformation tactics and urging that it was targeting a just group and that nothing in the Kigali festival and an activity managed to were observed. Macron announced that the military presence will involve in the press conference last February, but despite the frankly controversial withdrawing troops in not to be a horizon in Africans' life. Americans the started love affair with the Rwandan Paul Kagame as a president. However, Mbembe emphasized that the most important issue that anger Africans people, all generations included in the French, apparently blinded to try no in Africa. I can say this: what urge people bravo else in French blinding support to brutally and sometimes blood-shedding regime in the name of stabilization and stable for the fighting economy to grow up and be booming in business as a too big liar in Africans from different countries which still have colonial cognitive, also fake and false stabilization that the population do not seem to benefit from his speech and the President of African speech. Most recently, Macron ensured it is possible and supporting to stabilize in Chad and the key French in Sahel and speech building the former president de Finland. And more importantly, Macron raised the more effort French willing to put in Africa. It is targeted to the economy, to see how Africans' life could be improved to the standard normal. This presence was interpreted as supporting for taking over the power from Idris Deby and other people who were still currently on chair in Africa, because a military leadership is ready in Africa due to French brutality. French flag were banned during protest according to French report, and what we see all is that the French are being recognized in Africa for the insecurity, and other researchers are seeing is an opportunity to the booming economy of Africa. Initially, Macron really legitimately and there is the dynamic assassination of different people who involved in terror activity. He said he never be sleep on that an issue. In a good partnership, Macron said the Rwanda will benefit a lot, and there's no more a gift and penalty French could pay because they ignored and take a good huge responsibility in genocide that red vision of millions of people to die and his life and power and generation to die, which led the country to struggle in different aspects of life. He said big apology from the French overwhelming responsibility they took during genocide. Sincerely, he raised more hope that Rwanda is going to renew great relationship between the French and Rwanda to cooperate in different things for the purpose of lift up all the country to shine better